Okay, welcome today. We are starting the second session of environmental Kuznets curve that we already discussed in the previous class. So we will continue our topic. In the previous class, we talked about what are the issues that the world is facing, that the global world is warming up, and the, it is heating up, and the resources are being diminished, and the countries are substituting from the natural resources to other resources. So even though overall they are optimally using the resources, but their composition is changing. And then we introduce the concept of environmental Kuznets curve, and within that now we start with the term delinking. Okay, so you will be provided with the previous link, and this link will be the second session of that topic. So we'll start with today's topic. So advanced economies. Start with taking a pen. So advanced economies, economic system have been characterized by decreasing intensity of energy and materials per unit of output. So world is now trying to reduce the energy intensity, and it is driven by technological dynamics and regulatory pressures. Means world is putting a pressure that you should not use too much energy because it is creating pollution, and they are also using technology to find ways to make it as them energy efficient. OECD published one document in 2002 containing evidence that there is the evidence on delinking of growth. Now, the concept delinking means that we need to find a way that we can. We have already discussed in previous class that whenever we try to increase GDP, we also lead to increase CO2, and there is a link between them because we when we try to grow faster we use more resources, and most of the resources are fossil, so they create pollution. So delinking says that find a way that we can increase GDP without changing or even reducing CO2. So this is the concept that we are talking about here. So evidence that delinking of growth concerning diverse environmental indicators like climate change, air pollution, water quality, waste management, and material use. So they are all talking about that they are making sure that whenever they increase the GDP, it is not increasing climate change or air pollution or water quality or waste management or material use. So they are trying that we can increase GDP without harming through these channels. Delinking may occur on relative basis. The elasticity of environmental impact indicator with respect to the economic driver is positive but less than unity, or on an absolute basis by negative elasticity. So these are two ways to understand the delinking. First is either to just create a negative elasticity, which means that we increase GDP, but it is not harming the environment. It is actually improving the environment. Or another way is to have a relative indicator, that is that the elasticity is less than one. Means if we increase 1% GDP, the harm in the environment is less than 1%. So it means we are growing faster and environment is being deteriorated at a slower rate, and gradually it will slow down. It will reduced to zero. So these are two ways that it talked about here. The assessment of both delinking process can be referred to mostly applied research field concerning environmental Kuznets curve. So environmental Kuznets curve talks about that if we have a CO2 as a dependent variable and GDP as an independent variable, we talk about that it should have a less than one coefficient or negative coefficient. If it is less than one, we will say that it is relative. On the relative basis, GDP is not increasing CO2 equally, or on an absolute basis, it is decreasing CO2. The hypothesis derives from original works of Kuznets on the relationship between income and income distribution. So the idea started from development economics, but it has now being evolved into environmental economics. The EKC hypothesis is shortly that you may for that for many environmental impacts, the an inverted U-shaped relationship between per capita income and pollution. So it is saying that whenever if we have CO2 here and GDP here, so there is this type of relationship exists. So first of all, GDP will increase CO2 and then it will fall. So the concentration of a certain pollutant first increases with the income, reflecting the scale effect. So means until it is increasing, this is called scale effect. Okay, and more or less proportional, then eventually start to decrease and and delinking from income even on the absolute basis. So this portion will be the delinking. Okay, more specifically, the hypothesis predicts that environmental income elasticity decreases monotonically with income, and that it eventually changes its sign from positive to negative, thus defining a turning point in the U-shaped relation. So it is saying that the curve will change, and there is a point where the shape will change from positive to negative, and they call it the uh, turning point. So I can label that as turning point. Okay, and in the inverted U-shaped relation, it does not derive from the theoretical point, theoretical model. It is an intuitive conceptual approach, inductive in nature through the empirical explanation. Though some theoretical explanations have been emerged. So means this idea was purely conceptual, not deriving from theory, but people have tried to link it with the theory. Now we'll explore the how people have tested this model. So the idea was that in the long run, economic development reduces per capita environmental damage. Means if we keep on developing, we will tend eventually reduce the environmental damage. For the example is that when we have development, we will have sufficient wealth and technology, that we using that countries can adopt clean production methods and more service-based economy. What does it mean? That if you have more income, you will be able to afford clean products which are not environmentally harmful, or move to economy where the service oriented, there is no too much production in the system, so it will tend to reduce environmental damage. Inverted U-shaped relationship between economic development and environmental damage is what it is. That environmental damage per capita increases in the early stages of the economic development and reaches to a maximum, like it will reach to a maximum point here and then diminishes as the country attains higher income levels. So after that, it will start to diminish. It will reduce. Okay. So it is shown here. So there's one study that explained the environmental Kuznets curve for sulfur dioxide. So on the y-axis there is sulfur dioxide, and this study source is here. It was published in 1993, and independent variable is GNP per capita. It is saying that when their income was increasing from zero to a certain point, and we currently don't know yet, it will increase sulfur dioxide. And this point we already studied that this is a scale effect. And in this point, theoretically, people are buying things that they don't care what are the implications of that, because when their income is low, they are focusing more on fulfilling the necessities. So they are buying things that might be harmful for the environment. So the empirical relationship between sulfur dioxide emissions and the level of economic development of countries supports the EKC hypothesis, because it has made an almost inverted U shape. So after a certain level of income, they are rich enough to be aware that they should buy the things that are environmentally beneficial. So they will eventually buy the things that are good for the environment, and it will gradually reduce the sulfur dioxide in the environment. So this is the one of the empirical evidence of environmental Kuznets curve. And another study in 2009 compared CO2 emission with GDP per capita, and it found out that there are when we plot a scatter plot and create a straight line, it found out that there are few countries which are above the line, like almost on the line India, China, Kazakhstan, Saudi Arabia, United Emirates, and Oman. And there are a few countries which are below the line like France, Sweden, Bermuda, and Switzerland. So what does it talk about? So if this line is unit relationship between GDP and CO2, if so, it means if this line elasticity will be equal to 1. So the countries which are above has elasticity greater than 1, and these are elasticity less than 1. So it means these countries are relatively reducing environmental damage, and these are increasing the environmental damage. And this was the study by World Bank based upon the data set, and they are comparing the data in 2009. Okay. Next study, how do we motivate environmental Kuznets curve? From the supply side, means in terms of sellers, technology driven by economic growth. So how EK, what does it talk about? How we explain that the curve should bend? So from the supply side, it is saying that when the firms have higher profits, they will adopt technology that is more environmental friendly. The share of cleaner activities in the GDP increases with the scale of the economy. Means the if the economy is bigger, then there will be more people who are using cleaner activities like planting trees, using environmental friendly products. So what will happen is it will their share will increase. As the cost increases, market prices should reflect it, and it can be a self-regulatory mechanism. For example, if the coal is used in creating energy, and if the coal is becoming scarce in the world, coal will become expensive, and people will tend to find ways as an alternative uh, to get the energy. So it will become a supply side motivation from the sellers to find other ways to use to extract energy other than coal. So they might use solar panels or wind energy or hydro energy. So environmental policy are more likely in the developed economies, and it means the other side is that government policies that they motivate sellers to use green technologies, and then the property right enforcement, like the government will restrict overfishing or overcutting the trees or over extracting natural resources or even over polluting. So these some laws can enforce this way. These are some dimensions that explain how sellers will be motivated to use methods or techniques that are environmentally friendly, such that the EKC will turn downward from positive to negative. The demand side, environmental quality is the demand side. Environmental quality is used as a luxury good, and we use it as uh, when people will consider it as an important thing. Next is that since they consider environmental as a normal good, so higher income means higher willingness to pay for the environmental services. Means if people are becoming richer and they know that good environment is good, a luxury good for them, so they will be willing to pay more to get that product. Means they will be willing to use expensive products which are healthy and environmental friendly. They will be willing to use the expensive methods that do not harm the environment because they can afford it. So, and further, they will also accept higher taxes, which are designed to protect the environment. And since they are richer, new markets will be there that are selling us environmental friendly green goods. Okay, so they will be willing to go into that market which is targeting that thing. Okay, so preferences will change in the society. Marginal value of consumption is positive but decreasing. Means that when we already know that when people will become richer, that the proportion of consumption will fall and proportion of saving will increase. So gradually the consumption will not increase as fast as the income. We know it from the Keynesian consumption function. Environmental costs are increasing even steeply. Growth benefits are decreasing. Even a simple marginal cost benefit scheme may explain why delinking may occur. So it is saying that we need to find ways to reduce the environmental cost. As it is evident, many forces play their role in the interplay between supply and demand and between the policy and spontaneous market dynamics. So it means theoretically it could be possible that we can increase our income in the form of GDP and reduce the CO2 eventually after a certain level of income that we achieve. What is policy relevance? So EKC evidence may support the idea that no policy is needed. No, we might not need to punish our economy where, with an assumption that it is harming our environment. Market forces and market dynamics are self-sufficient to intervene in this idea. Means after a certain time, it will automatically try to correct itself. Okay, but the environmental impact may be higher than what it is defined as sustainable. Policy efforts are needed. Policy efforts are needed to support and correct market. So what it is saying is that with the GDP increase, we will eventually start to reduce CO2 after a certain time. But till that time there will be a certain level of CO2 that can be supported with the help of policy regulations, find ways to make sure that people tend to move down quickly rather than they go to the top first and then come down. So this is the discussion that we'll move in the coming slide. Empirical evidence, which has mainly concerned air emissions, are still ambiguous. Many studies are still saying that EKC does not exist. Some pollutants show a turning point. Others, through its shared view that some critical externalities like CO2 waste flows are monotonically rising with income. At best, relative delinking may be occurring. So it is saying that it is not confirming that there will be inverted U shape in some of the studies, because for delinking we need either negative slope or a slope which is less than 1. So it is saying that most of the studies are not able to confirm this idea, but they are trying to confirm this idea that the slope is less than 1. So relative delinking. Okay, and that is written by Stern in 2004. So air quality indicators, here you will also learn how what kind of variables you can use in your term papers. So air quality indicators, so people have used air quality indicators like CO2, sulfur, particulate matter, and they seem to show an inverted U shape. So studies have confirmed using these variables. Pollutants like global pollutants either rise monotonically with income or even present at a higher present very high turning point. Okay, or it is saying that for global pollutants the turning point is very far, and it has not even reached for the US yet. Means USA has not crossed that point even, because even though it is the richest country in the world, so technically that EKC does not exist. So private and public goods are far, as far as countries are concerned, free riding on the global commons and policy needed. So it is saying why it is so, because there is a free riding in the globally dimension. Means that the countries are not considering their actions and their effect on other countries, so they are just enjoying their free riding, and there's a need of policy to try to enforce the EKC idea on the global level. Now talking about the water indicators, turning point is generally higher for water indicators, and EKC sometimes exists, but there is one study that is talking about that there is an N shape. Now it is not like this is N shape. So it is saying that it has proposed that it is actually not inverted U, it is N. So we will talk about that in the coming slides. Okay, now to the next slide. We talked about the air quality indicators. now talk about the waste. So empirical evidence of delinking. Now we need to make sure that we understand what the term delinking means. Concerned environmental waste indicators probably is probably the scarcest because its data is not very, and there are not many types of data sets available for that. Okay, so contribution providing results for waste are rare. Cole, Cole et al. In 1997 find no evidence of inverted U shape when it is talking about the GDP and municipal waste. So for that, the increase in GDP is not reducing or relatively or absolutely the municipal waste. And then Mazanti, Zoboli paper in 2005, the waste on delinking. There is currently no evidence concerning the delinking with respect to primary resources of waste in Europe, like municipal and packaging waste, which has been targeted by waste-oriented European directives aimed to at reducing diverse environmental externalities and waste production. So it is saying that we are not able to confirm that there is a delinking that exists. So it means when we are studying EKC, we are actually trying to find the delinking evidence. Some other evidence, the turning points were 2003 dollar per capita found in 2003 baseline dollar value per capita, and based on CO2 they found out that this is the size of turning point, that income should be more than 37,000. Based on carbon monoxide, it is something 16,000. Nitrates, it is 25 to 41,000. Nitrogen dioxide is 25 to 29,000. Sulfur dioxide is 10,000. Sulfur dioxide trans is 12 to 13,000. Suspended particles, which is
सर
PM.
आपकी स्क्रीन शो नहीं हो रही.
So here we talked about the turning points for different types, and these are then last one is particulate matters. So what it is saying that for our type, where at what level of GDP it will cut the turn on the other side. Okay, this was for the delinking. Next is water pollution. Differentiated EKC evidence is by pollutants. So the results are very different for different type of pollutants. Like for nitrates is 34,000, and for lead it is 17,700. Uh, and for nitrate is 3,400. For other pollutants like cadmium, fissile, coliforms, oxygen, arsenic, sulfur, it is somewhere between 8 to 13,000 dollar of income. So it is saying that after that it tries to reduce it. For deforestation, the data quality is very low because deforestation does not necessarily mean that the trees have been cut. Deforestation is a complex issue. There are many other reasons behind cutting the trees, not only for the getting wood. The empirical for evidence for tropical countries and Latin America and Africa, when the income crosses 9,000 to 8 or 8,000, and in Africa and in Africa mostly 5,000, they start to not to do the deforestation. Other studies show that 10,000 to 12,000 in 2003. Other evidence by this study find the lower turning points occurring at 1,000 to 3,000, but we recall that the environmental peak matters. So he's saying that it's not only talking about that when it will turn from positive to negative, it also matters how much peak it will have. That peak also have an effect on the economy. So Panayu too also describes that most dramatic impact occurs between 1,000 to 3,000 per capita in China, Africa, and India. Okay. So first methodological problem for the applied analysis is how specifying the EKC relationship, means how to do the analysis. Some authors use the second order polynomial, others estimated third, even fourth order polynomials. Polynomial means they used x square, x cube, x4. Okay. power of the independent variable. Comparing different specifications for relative robustness, is it worth noting that neither the quadratic nor cubic function can be considered a full realistic representation of environmental relationship. So it means there is a room for improvement. You can use square or cube or even power 4, and then you need to find which one is the best. The cubic function that people use implies that environmental degradation will tend to plus or minus infinitely as income increases. The quadratic implies that environmental degradation could eventually tend to zero. The issue is thus highly undersolved. Means that there is a debate how to check EKC. Shobi in 2004 suggested the third order polynomial. Means what he did, he used CO2 as a dependent and GDP square and GDP cube as an independent variables to check for the delinking or environmental Kuznets relationship between environmental degradation and income per capita. This supports that the credence of logistic shape, wherein environmental degradation first accelerates, then decelerates, and eventually falls. So he's trying to say that it looks like this. It should first exponentially increase, then slow down, and then come down. So it looks like this. So marginal economic degradation is thus not modeled as a constant. Means this relationship is not a constant. Thus still remains highly unsolved resolved with the EKC opposite relying mainly on the empirical evidence, means basically on the data. The theoretical foundation of EKC are still ambiguous, though most contributions have been emerged by Andironi and Levinson in 2001. So that he's saying that there's a debate how to check if there is a delinking or not. Third and fourth level polynomial could also lead to an N shape, then U shape curves. So it will create an N, opening new problematic issues in understanding the income environmental phenomena. Thus, this N shape is justified as a nonlinear effect by the scale of the economic activity, and it is very difficult. It is difficult to prove. Finally, the use of income factors only without quadratic or cubic term, means without any higher power, would collapse the EKC analysis to basic decoupling analysis. Means so your CO2 as a dependent and GDP only as an independent. So it's beta. If it is less than 1, it will show that there is a decoupling. Otherwise, there is no decoupling. For simple representation EKC with discussion of the core hypothesis, you can see other studies like De Bruyn 1998 and Stern 2004. The aforementioned delinking hypothesis is tested by several studies, and, reduced form usually is, and we'll talk about the study by Stern 2004. Panel data he used panel data framework where the relative fit or fixed effect and end effect models were used. It allows the treatment of unobserved factors, means it was a fixed effect model, and it also used the cross section data frame and explored the endogeneity and causal relationship. The need to move the analysis from cross sectional to a regional analysis or may hide EKC specificity. We just estimate the mean values, not the policy value. So it is saying that the challenges are there in the data. So the hypotheses on delinking are thus tested by estimating reduced form regression, like a log of waste per capita in intercept. I means the fixed effect term, intercept slope of log of consumption to GDP ratio divided by plus consumption to GDP ratio square plus consumption to GDP ratio cube, where the first two terms are intercept parameters which vary across countries and years. So they are for panel data. Okay. Now we talk about some studies that talked about it. So extensive literature has been developed since 90s on this topic. They are biased on emissions at macro level because of the good availability of data, but rough data needed for panel of regional studies. So When you do it at a country level, you only need one value for a country that is easily available. So the main objective of finding of turning point, the main objective is the finding of turning point means they were able to find the turning point means the inverted U shape. But even the presence of demonstrated turning point may not issue a sustainable path. That is that turning point presence of turning point is not a solution. It is that can we able to be able to cross it, or how much the height of the curve will be. The irreversible losses over the certain environment impact. But he's saying that the time we will take to cross this point, how much damage is already done. Damage. Okay, developed and non-developed countries may the world economy sustain the impact of EKC paths in developing countries equal to the experienced by Western economies. So he's trying to say that they both will take different speed to cross this point. The problem is consequential development with scarce resources means that when we are trying to cross, there is already some damage done. Innovation must be transferred in order to cut the developing countries' EKC. This is a critical issue within Kyoto Protocol. What he's trying to say is that rich countries have already developed innovation that can help them to go in the negative side, but they are not sharing their technology to developing countries, and that has been discussed in the Kyoto Protocol. Now we are studying some studies like List and Gallet. So they used sulfur dioxide and nitrogen dioxide in the panel data and panel data of US states. Okay, the issue of omitted variables when including additional explanatory variable. So EKC, what is saying that when we change the control variables, the nature of EKC changes, which it means that it has an omitted variable problem. State level evidence is needed. They find that states with urban areas are more densely populated show turning point at the lower incomes, so more policy. So but he's talking about that first problem is that the EKC will is sensitive to control variables. Secondly, there's one indicator that they talked about that more densely population show lower turning point. Next study is in 2001, and they used weather, population density, and industrialization and trade intensity. So evidence suggested that they show that SO2 smoke and total suspension particles and GDP relationship is sensitive to both sample selection and empirical specification, and there was no EKC evidence there. Now we talk about the role of trade. Some authors claim that some pollutants the EKC evidence may only imply that more pollutants activities are moved to other countries, like from Western to developing countries, means that rich countries are experiencing the negative region because they have moved their dirty industries dirty industries to the developing countries in the form of FDI. So they are able to enjoy decoupling, but the developing countries are now facing problems. So this is occurring because of trade. Okay, now we'll see that. So a study by Markandia et al. In 2004 says that in the European 12 countries, in the long time series, they try to estimate the EKC. So they compared the sulfur emissions from 1850 to 1999. It has top value in 9 countries during this region. So best fit with fourth order polynomial. So they ST model up till x to power 4. The turning points, there were 2 turning points because it's an x to raised to power 4. So 7,000 and 25,000 per capita income. Individual countries in LC show different model fits and different turning points. Then UK only to account for the effects acts and regulations on emissions, including demi policy years, and it has shown no effect that the government policies that are not able to change the cutoff point to a lower level or had the decoupling process. Okay, now we are going to our conclusion. A study by McPherson et al. in 2005 in ecological economics, and they created EKC on threatened species as a dependent variable. So data was available for 100 countries into year 2000. So it's a cross-country data, not a panel data. So dependent variable was threatened species in 2000 or extinct in earlier. So they compared for the bird and mammal, the curves seems rising about to about 10,000 to 15,000. Then species classifies as threatened decreases. After that, there is a turning point. Population density negatively impacts it. Islamic and post-communist and communist countries have more species as threatened. Property rights definition is not clear in these countries. Green policies in democratic countries. This opens a new public choice for political issue, that is growth, democracy, and environment. And what is saying that there is an EKC for in terms of threatened species as a dependent variable and income as an independent variable. The study on European waste result indicate that stronger efforts are needed in order to increase the waste-oriented efficiency of economic processes. They confirm that the concerning primary waste issues, even relative delinking is questioned on average at the European level. Environmental policymakers should remain hesitant about the idea of economic growth as a self-sufficient driving force of environmental improvements. The reality is much more complex, means it sometimes it is not self-driving. The income elasticity of primary non-hazard waste flows in European countries is likely to become in the medium term less than one, but not negative. Means gradually they will have the slope less than one, but it will never become negative. It does not seem to go towards that. Final points, different polynomial specifications are tested by including dependent variables and of different types, and then independent variables in terms of consumption or GDP, or some others use the production side. In the fact, recent studies by Rothman, EEA, pointed out that the municipal packaging waste, the proper economic indicator is not GDP but household consumption, and this is a key issue for both conceptual and statistical grounds. Means people are currently deciding how to test it. So EKC framework has confirmed that there is the need to triggering innovation. Why? Because we found out that the cutoff points are not same, and sometimes it doesn't exist, and sometimes they are very far. So we need to do innovation so that we can innovate it quickly, so that we can move from positive to negative. Since property right definitions, market functioning, environmental policies, and income are the four main sources of innovation, a study by Komen et al. 1997 on the relationship between income and public R&D in environmental protection activities, they find that income elasticity is not different from one, means there is no decoupling, it is near to one. It shows that the relevancy of income, it is increases R&D, which increases innovation, which increases growth and sustainable development, and it is and there is the complex linkage. So you can find more details on this website. There are more papers that are talking about EKC. I will conclude this topic in a way that the recent studies are talking about how to make it work. So I will draw the diagram here so that you can understand what are the recent developments in the concept of EKC. There are first development was that they create a model like CO2 or any other polluted type, and then intercept plus slope of GDP and slope 2 of GDP square. So first set of models try to do was that they try to add control variable type and say that if by adding a control variable can it make this work. So if this will work only if beta is positive and beta 1 is negative, okay, negative, so zero. So they are trying to see like role of financial development, role of education, role of policies. It can be continuous variable or dummy variable. So this was the first generation of models that people used. Second generation people used is to use alpha plus beta GDP plus beta 2 GDP square plus theta CV control variable plus theta 1 GDP into CV plus theta 2 GDP square into CV. So what they try to do is, can theta make beta positive? So because it will be added when the CV is solved, and can this theta 2 is negative enough to make beta 3 negative, so that it will tend to make it downward. So what we are talking about, that uh, that this is our EKC and this turning point is very far, and we are exploring a ways that can we use a control variable so that the curve is shifted leftward or downward, so that the cutoff value is becoming smaller. So the country which is standing here, which is inefficient with respect to old curve, but it has become efficient with respect to the new curve. So this has been discussed in current literature. So I hope you understood the dynamics of environmental presence curve, and you will be using this idea in relating the economic and environmental variables, and then make it complicated in terms of adding an appropriate policy variable in either first generation approach or a second generation approach. The second generation approach is more complicated, but proper mathematics can help you to understand this model.